Volubilis is a partly excavated Berber-Roman city in Morocco situated near the city of Metz, and may have been the capital of the kingdom of Mauretania, at least from the time of King Juba II. Before Volubilis, the capital of the kingdom may have been at Gilda. Built in a fertile agricultural area, it developed from the 3rd century BC onward as a Berber, then proto-Carthaginian settlement before being the capital of the kingdom of Mauretania. It grew rapidly under Roman rule from the 1st century and onward and expanded to cover about 42 hectares with a 2.6 circuit of walls. The city gained a number of major public buildings in the 2nd century, including a basilica, temple, and triumphal arch. Its prosperity, which was derived principally from olive growing, prompted the construction of many fine townhouses with large mosaic floors. The city fell to local tribes around 285 and was never retaken by Rome because of its remoteness and indefensibility on the southwestern border of the Roman Empire. It continued to be inhabited for at least another 700 years, first as a Latinized Christian community, then as an early Islamic settlement. In the late 8th century it became the seat of Idris ibn Abdallah, the founder of the Idrisid dynasty of Morocco. By the 11th century, Volubilis had been abandoned after the seat of power was relocated to Fez. Much of the local population was transferred to the new town of Moulay Idris Zerhoun, about 5 from Volubilis. The origins of its name are unknown, but may be a Latinization of the Amazigh word wallalt, meaning oleander, which grows along the sides of the valley. Built on a shallow slope below the Zerhoun mountain, Volubilis stands on a ridge above the valley of Cowman, where it is met by a small tributary stream called the Furtisa. It overlooks a rolling fertile alluvial plain north of the modern city of Metz. The area around Volubilis has been inhabited at least since the late Atlantic Neolithic. Some 5,000 years ago, archaeological excavations at the site have found Neolithic pottery of design comparable to pieces found in Iberia. By the 3rd century BC, the Carthaginians had a presence there, as evidenced by the remains of a temple to the Punic god Baal and finds of pottery and stones inscribed in the Phoenician language. The city lay within the kingdom of Mauretania, which became a Roman client state following the fall of Carthage in 146 BC. The Punic influence lasted for a considerable time afterwards, as the city's magistrates retained the Carthaginian title of Suffet long after the end of Punic rule. Juba II of Numidia was placed on the Mauretanian throne by Augustus in 25 BC and turned his attention to building a royal capital at Volubilis. Educated in Rome and married to Cleopatra Selene II, the daughter of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, Juba and his son Ptolemy were thoroughly Romanist kings, although of Berber ancestry. Their preference for Roman art and architecture was clearly reflected in the city's design. The city remained loyal to Rome despite a revolt in 4044 and led by one of Ptolemy's freedmen, Adomon, and its inhabitants were rewarded with grants of citizenship. The city was raised to the status of a municipium and its system of governance was overhauled, with the Punic-style suffets replaced by annually elected duumvirs or pairs of magistrates. However, the city's position was always tenuous. It was located on the southeastern edge of the province facing hostile and increasingly powerful Berber tribes. A ring of 5 forts located at the modern hamlets of Anshkur, Bled, El Ghada, Sidi Moussa, Sidi Sed, and Bled Takerart were constructed to bolster the city's defense. Sidi Sed was the base for the cohors IV Gallorum Equitata, an auxiliary cavalry unit from Gaul, while Anshkur housed Hispanic and Belgic cohorts. Sidi Moussa was the location of a cohort of Parthians and Gallic and Syrian cavalry were based at Tuscalosida. Rising tensions in the region near the end of the 2nd century led the Emperor Marcus Aurelius to order the construction of a 2.5 circuit of walls with 8 gates and 40 towers. Volubilis was connected by road to Lixus and Tinges, but had no eastwards connections with the neighbouring province of Mauretania Caesariensis, as the territory of the Berber Baquatus tribe lay in between. A Jewish community existed in Volubilis in the 3rd century, as evident from several Hebrew, Greek, and Latin funeral inscriptions and menorah-shaped lamps. It is the most southwestern location where ancient Hebrew inscription has been found. Rome's control over the city ended following the chaos of the crisis of the 3rd century, when the empire nearly disintegrated as a series of generals seized and lost power through civil wars, palace coups, and assassinations. Around 280, Roman rule collapsed in much of Mauretania and was never re-established. In 285, although a Roman army was based in Tinges, it was decided that it would simply be too expensive to mount a reconquest of a vulnerable border region. Occupation of the city continued, however, as fine mosaics, such as that of a chariot race conducted by animals in the House of Venus, cannot have been created earlier than the 4th century. The end of the Roman city probably came in the form of an earthquake towards the end of the century, which buried numerous bronze statues in the wreckage of the houses. Volubilis continued to be inhabited for centuries after the end of Roman control. It was certainly reoccupied by the Eastern Roman Empire in the 6th and 7th century, when 3 Christian inscriptions are dated by the provincial year. By the time the Arabs had arrived in 708, the city's name was changed to Awalala or Wall, and it was inhabited by the Oroba, a Berber tribe that originated in Libya. Much of the city centre had been abandoned and was turned into a cemetery, while the centre of habitation had moved to the southwest of the city, where a new wall was built to contain the abridged Roman town. Volubilis remained the capital of the region well into the Islamic period. Islamic coins dating to the 8th century have been found on the site, attesting to the arrival of Islam in this part of Morocco. They are concentrated outside the city walls, which suggests that Arab settlement remained distinct from the Berber settlement inside them. It was here that Muley Idris established the Idrisid dynasty of Morocco in 787-8. A direct descendant of the Islamic prophet, Muhammad, he escaped to Morocco from Syria following the Battle of Fak in 787. He was proclaimed imam in Volubilis, occupied by the Oroba under Ishaq ibn Mohammed. He married Kanza from the Oroba and fathered a son, Idris-I, who was proclaimed imam in Volubilis. He too lived outside the walls of the city along the banks of the Wadi Kauman, where a complex has recently been excavated that may be identified with his headquarters. Idris-I conquered most of northern Morocco during the 3 years of his reign, founding the city of Fez. He was assassinated in Volubilis in 791 on the orders of the Caliph of Baghdad, Harun al-Rashid. On his majority Idris-I removed to Fez, which served as his new capital, depriving Volubilis of its last vestiges of political significance.